Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I am talking with Brieanna Lightfoot Smith. Brieanna believes a peaceful home and a purposeful brand can coexist. As a business owner, productive coach, and systems strategist, she loves helping women, especially fellow moms, gain clarity and confidence. As someone who passed out in her car at 7 months pregnant, she's extremely passionate about helping people create a life they love without burning out in the process. So, everyone, let's welcome Brieanna. How are you?
And I know we talked online, the children were childrening,
Oh,
as the young folks would say today. But I'm just very grateful because it just means I get to show up even more authentically.
right. Hey, I listen, I love that. I did an interview with one lady, and I think my son like came busting in the room, and I'm trying to like point it. She's like, listen, let's just be real here. We're moms. It happens. She's like, it's
Mhm.
fine. So I think we like spiraled off and talked about that for probably about 5 or 10 minutes or something. So
Mhm.
it is what it is. We're moms,
Yeah.
we're business owners, we have kids, and I think you said you have boys, right? Okay. So he's like, well, I'm just gonna sit in the hallway outside the door. Of like,
Oh my gosh,
or you
not
can go
outside
play
the
in your
door.
room,
Right. Like it,
So,
whatever floats your boat, brother.
yeah, what I'm like, just don't make too much noise, please, because I need to be able to
Yeah.
hear what's going on. So,
Yeah.
so Brianna, how long have you been an entrepreneur and how did you get started?
I have been an entrepreneur for a decade, which sounds wild. I started right after graduating from college, kind of fell into it. I have a background in journalism, and my aunt has a foster care and adoption agency that she still runs. And so she was like, "We need a monthly newsletter and we need a website. Can you do that?" And "Aunt Sandra, I don't really build websites." She was like, "You can figure it out." And I've never backed down from a challenge. I love learning, building their brand awareness. And I just really started pursuing small businesses and nonprofits. And it has evolved so much in the last 10 years, but that's how I got started.
Okay, cool. And so, can you share a little bit about your business with us and tell us what exactly it is that you do?
Absolutely. So, Brands by Bree is a coaching and consulting company helping aspiring mompreneurs and also female entrepreneurs build their businesses with confidence and clarity. We do this through digital courses, through coaching, and through our content. And we've been able to work with over 100 women in the last 18 months
Oh, wow.
through those different offerings, which is really exciting.
That's really awesome and really exciting. So that's really cool. And I love that. Like, you said that your aunt was like, hey, can you do this? And I just feel like with the older generation, the generation above us, they just feel like we can do anything
They
and
do.
everything. Cause whenever I'm around like my mom's like siblings and stuff, they're like, oh, can you do this? And can you do that? And I'm like, what makes y'all think that I can do this? Or sometimes my
Yes.
mom, she'll call me and she's like, well, what does such and such mean? Or what is this? And I'm like, you do know that I don't have all the answers, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know everything. I'm like, I'm probably gonna end up Googling it just like you are.
Right,
I don't
right. They
know,
like, you
but
are my Google.
exactly. My mom has told me that multiple times. She's like, well, you are my Google. She's like, you'll find it quicker than I can. So I figure I might as
Mm-mm.
well just go ahead and ask you. I'm like, oh my goodness. But I love that your aunt like kind of gave you the push to do
She
something
did.
that you didn't even know you could do. So how can someone build a business on a budget? Because you can go into a lot of debt if you don't have like investors or backing trying to build a business. And we all know that it takes years for business to actually start to see that. So how can you do that
Absolutely.
on a budget?
You really have to identify your essentials, your aspirational goals, and it's kind of like the need to haves, the nice to haves, right? You
Okay.
you need to be able to understand what are the things my business actually needs for me to function, and then what are the things that, okay, maybe if after I hit this specific revenue mark or after we've been able to serve X amount of clients or we've sold X amount of products, I want to make sure I add this in. I think that a big mistake that I made early in my business, especially having a graphic design background and like a visual, just a natural bend to like things that look pretty. I was changing my business cards every few months. I was getting all these different printables, and I'm like, sis, you don't need all of that, right? And it's so
Right.
funny because as I continued in my business, and even now sometimes, and we have worksheets, I'm still going to Office Depot and printing stuff off, if not the library. Sometimes I'm going to the library and printing stuff off for 10 cents a sheet, right?
Right.
Because we feel like, oh, well, it just has to be more expensive. And I think of that quote that says that rich people stay rich by acting poor, and poor people stay poor by acting rich, right?
Yes.
I can grow into that. I think it makes a big difference. And firm belief, like, you do not need a website to get started. To get started. Notice what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't stay at never having a website, right? But when you're first getting started, if you can use something like, find some kind of way, like if you can use Stripe for payment processing, even for product-based businesses. One of my friends, she has a sweet treats company, and so she does cookies and cupcakes, and she just invoices you through PayPal and you pay that way, and then she drops it off. Like, it's not a bunch of fanfare. And a
Right.
lot of times when we're going straight for, okay, this needs to look like $1 million business, well, now you are in debt. And now even when you get those big projects and you get paid, you're just using it to pay down like all of this money that you've spent.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Like, I can definitely relate to that because I've talked about it on my show before, but I used to have a craft business. And so I was going out, people are like, oh, I want a different color t-shirt. I want this. So I'm going out and I'm buying all these shirts. And then it may just be me buying one color shirt, but I got to pay shipping on that shirt. Or I'm not keeping product on hand because I don't want to get a whole bunch of the shirts and then nobody orders them. But then somebody sees and they're like, oh, I want that exact shirt. And it's like, okay, now I'm paying more on the shipping. And I was just going out getting stuff that I thought people would want. Or like you said, I'm like, oh, I need a website. And I was using a free website, and then they decided that it wasn't going to be like free anymore to connect your own domain, because I had paid like the $12 like connect your like forward your domain or whatever. So then I was like, okay, I got to go out and pay the money to buy the website. And I was doing all the stuff. And like you said, when I did get I had a couple pretty big orders that had I not went out and spent all that money, it would have actually been, something good that I could have put into my business account. And when I started this business and I started my podcast, I was like, okay, what can I use for free? Like, where, like you said, what do I actually need to get this started? And what can I do for free or for very little money? So I
It's the
think
same thing with bartering too. Like, sometimes people will offer you, one of the things that I say is that I saved like $500 several years ago getting headshots done in exchange for ad time on my podcast, because my podcast reached the demographic that my photographer was trying to reach. And so I recorded a few podcast episodes for her, let her know that if we held any live events that she could come. And she even was like, oh, could I grab photos there? Because I'm trying to build out the event side of my business. I'm like, absolutely, no problem. And I still use those pictures now because, shout out to melanin, right? Like, I
yeah.
look pretty similar as I did several years ago. And I mix my hair up sometimes, but I always will go back to that updo that I had in there occasionally as well. So I've saved who knows how much more. And then I even ended up using that photo on a book cover. And I had reached out to her for her to make sure that I was putting her credit in correctly. And she said, honestly, I actually charge a fee, like a commercial use fee. She said, but you've sent me so many clients, don't even worry about it. So that was like an ongoing relationship.
Yeah, I love bartering. And I actually, well, by the time this episode comes out, I will actually have already released an episode about like bartering in business. Because I have done it before, and it's a great tool when both parties like keep up with their end of the barter. Because I have been involved in some barters where it's just like I did my part and they didn't do their part, and then I'm left hanging. But it's such an awesome tool, like you said, with the photography, and then she got advertisement, and then she ended up getting clients, and you got headshots that can last you for a while. So when it's used correctly, it's awesome. So what is a customer avatar and how do you create one? Because I always struggle with that.
Yeah. So a customer avatar is really you creating the character in your business. I like to get very, very detailed. They are thinking about including, gets on social media that first thing when she gets up. I need to post earlier in the day. Or if I know that she's not looking at it all day, she's the one who after a long day, she finally gets in the bed and is like, let me scroll on TikTok for an hour or two, then that's where I need to be. And that's the time that I need to show up. And so when you're creating your ideal customer avatar, it's really allowing you to get into the mindset of the person that you want to serve so that you can start using language that they connect with, and they start feeling like, oh my gosh, is this person in my brain? Or like, have they been reading my diary? Like, how do they know all of this?
So I get, like I get the gist of it, and I'll be good, and I'll be like, okay, I got my demographic, and they always say like give the person a name and an age and a job title. So like I can do all that. But then when it gets down to like the details, like you said, like the route that they take to work, what time do they get on social media? Like, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And so then that's where I always kind of struggle at with creating it. So
Yeah.
how can someone go about building it, like someone who struggles? Like what are the steps that they can take to really get down with those details that you just mentioned?
I would encourage people to survey individuals they know they would like to work with. I would also say interview people that you have worked with already. Like I know I have so many, I love all of my clients, but I can literally say 6 people off the top of my head where I know I could call them up and be like, sis, I need a updated testimonial from you. Like, share this. But those are the same people I could go to and say, what made you want to work with me? What kind of headspace were you in before you started working with me? So interviewing people you've already worked with is really helpful. And I think that that's something that people miss out on sometimes because they're like, oh, I already worked with them, I don't want to bother them. No, it allows you to create that relationship, cultivate that relationship. And a lot of times people are really honored that you want to like include them in whatever it is that you're creating. I had to make a case study for the Goldman Sachs Black in Business program that I'm graduating from in a couple weeks. And when I told one of my clients, like, hey, sis, can I use you for this case study? She was like, I am honored. Of course you can. Like, let me send you some updated headshots and, all of that. So I would encourage people to interview people they've already worked with. Understand that a lot of times not always, but a lot of times our ideal client is a past version of ourselves. So if you start thinking like, okay, what is something that Angel needed in 2021 that 2023 Angel knows more about, like, and how would she have received this information, then that's really helpful as well. Was she listening to podcasts more back then, or was she reading more books? Was she, that's why I know like magazines and stuff, I don't ever really go there for my clients in terms of, I don't really think a lot about putting ads in magazines because I'm like, baby, reading? Mama? Reading? Like, we're listening to an audiobook or we're listening to a podcast. If we are reading, probably going for more like personal development. I know it's helpful, but like I'm tired, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to know that about your audience.
Okay, yeah, I like that. And I'm definitely like, I love to read and I try to carve out time for reading. But like you said, it's more like a memoir or something that's like fiction that's like I can, imagine like
Escape.
what's going on and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so every now and then I'll do a self-help book, but usually those are the ones that take me like forever to get through
Yep.
because I can't just speak because I feel like I need to take it all in
You
and I need
gotta
to make
apply
notes.
it. You
Yeah,
got
and
yep.
you
Put
do
it on
this
your
and
calendar.
right. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, they give you all these work of these steps that you should do and stuff like that. And I'm just like, this 100-page book,
Yeah.
it's 6 months later and I haven't finished it yet.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that one. And so how can you go about building the right business model?
When I talk about building the right business model, I'm really talking about how do you identify the business that you want to create for you. It's cool to say, oh, I would love to create this product, but have you done the additional research that goes into that, right? Like, do you have the capacity to ship items? Do you need to do drop shipping? Are you in a place where you need to do a service-based business? Are you a mom with young kids? And so you know that you can't do a lot of Zoom calls because you're gonna be doing that sign language in the background, telling Johnny to get off of Bill's head and all the other stuff. Like, you have to be intentional in understanding the ways that you're creating your business to support you. And one of the things, like you read in my bio, I'm really big on building a business and life you love without burning out in the process. And a lot of that comes with that self-awareness. If you do not even understand how you function as a person, when your ideal hours are in the day, you can start working on a business that really doesn't serve you well for the season that you're in. And it's really important to understand that those seasons can also shift. When I had younger children, the Zoom calls and stuff weren't as big of a deal, right? Because it's like, oh, well, they're playing either really quietly or one's taking a nap, or two of them are taking a nap. But as my boys continue to get older, after X amount of Zoom calls, they like, you're still doing meetings? You're still doing meetings? It's the reason why I did start offering our courses within Brands by Bree Academy so that they could be self-paced. And also the reason why I decided to do group coaching programs and not as much one-on-one as I had done before, because I realized, like, even for my own sake, I don't want to be in front of a computer all day. And when they start noticing it too, it's like, oh yeah, something's definitely got to move. So it requires self-awareness, and it requires honesty and understanding. Again, the business you start today, it's not like you're locked in and you can never expand beyond what you're doing currently. Because I think sometimes when we have the big vision of, I want to have the brick and mortar, or I want to have a big team, we look at the model that really makes the most sense for where we are right now. We're like, but that's not going to get me where I need to be. And I encourage my students, I'm like, listen, you have to be willing to do version 1 of a thing and then grow from there.
I agree with that. And like I said, it's so weird because you do have this vision of what you expect it to look like. And then you see on social media that, this person just went from the foundation to the whole house was built and everything just happened in a month. And so it can be very frustrating when you're in that space where you're still trying to build things up and where you're still trying to figure out exactly what's going to work and what's going to change and what's going to work for you and what you need to change. And then some people, because this is even like speaking for myself, like I was, I felt embarrassed when I first started my business now that I have, and I started off as a virtual assistant. And then it kind of went to like business organizing. And then it was business organizing and like public relations. And I'm like, oh my gosh, people aren't going to take me seriously because I keep like changing stuff and, revamping and changing my services. But like you said, you have to figure out what's going to work for you in the season that you're in. And not to say that I will never go back to offering those services or doing those things. But right now, that's not where I'm at. And that's not what I need in my life. And there's nothing wrong with it. He said you don't want to get burnt out, and you're going to quickly get burnt out if you're trying to do stuff that's not fitting into the capacity that you have. What's something that motherhood has taught you about yourself and your business?
I would love to say it's taught me how to be flexible, and I think it has forced me to be flexible in some ways, but it's also taught me how much structure I need, like how much I thrive in routines. Because if it is a day where I feel like we're just flying by the seat of my pants, I feel like my temper is a lot shorter, right? My temperament is a lot shorter. I feel like I find myself to be stressed. I find myself to be not as intentional, like with our activities, right? But when I'm sitting down and I'm writing my items in my planner and I'm saying, okay, these are the big 3 things that have to get done today, and here are the fun activities that we plan to do today, it just flows so much better. And people talk about how children thrive with structure, but adults thrive with structure too. I mean, even if you're in the corporate space, when you go into work and they like, we don't know what you're doing, and I don't know, figure it out. You're like, what the heck? What's going on here? This feels like madness. And so it's the same thing with our kids.
And so you said in your bio that you passed out in your car when you were 7 months pregnant. What happened?
I was burned out. I was doing too much. I was working a full-time job. I had a part-time job because I was a mad woman. And then I was also building my company on the side. And a lot of that came from the achievement drivenness of it all, right? I love being in spaces where I feel like I'm affirmed. And so I was able to like get that in so many different places. I'm also a lifelong learner, and a lot of the things that I do are driven by community. And so there was just this opportunity I saw where the full-time job was helping to cover the costs of things like book signings when I was in my author era, right? And then I'm also like, okay, well, I can use this investment to now it makes sense to have a website so I can get that done. And I was designing my own websites. Thankfully, I was able to save money on that end, but I'm like, okay, I'm paying for my web hosting out of this and all of that, right? The commingling of funds was definitely really happening. I've learned so much more about business and finance, and you need to have, listen, y'all, if you don't get nothing else from this episode, you need to have a separate bank account for your business, get your EIN, and you don't even have to get a LLC to start. You can get a doing business as license, which is typically much cheaper. You can start that. That's enough to open up a bank account with. Get your stuff sent to your business bank account. If you want to make a withdrawal, then write yourself a check from your business. But back then there wasn't none of that. It was like, okay, we over here. Okay, I think that was for the business. Oh, that's for me. You know, it was too much. So
all over the place.
Anyway, because I was doing all of that, my body was like, okay, this girl's not listening, you know, and I really felt like that was just the Lord's way of slowing me down and really affirming my identity in him in a weird way, because about a year after I passed, you would have thought it would be immediately, but
no, it never is.
No, never is. So I did end up leaving the full-time job. I worked the part-time job through the end of that contract, which was like a couple months more. And then when those were gone, I was like, okay, see, now it's time for full-time entrepreneurship. And God was like, this girl is still not getting it. So about a year after that, I had a breakdown in the back of our sanctuary at church. And everyone was like, what's going on? I was like, I just have so much on my plate and I just can't manage it all. And I'm just tired. And I told my husband, I was like, I don't want to be an entrepreneur anymore. I just want to come home and be a mom. And he was like, okay. And at that point, I was pregnant with our second son. That's what I did. And I was a full-time stay-at-home, scratch-made meals type of mama for about 3 years. Okay. And it was hard because as someone who's really used to achievement, and out of nowhere, like I'd be sitting on the floor with my boys and he'd go, this was always the plan. Or even a few weeks ago, even now with me having added business back into the equation, he was like, I know where you are. And I'm like, okay, God, thank you. But he knows me, and he knows that sometimes if I feel like stuff is not coming out the way it's supposed to, or I put in the right data, but the output ain't, and it's not, there's a disconnect. The spreadsheet is broken, right? Like,
yes.
When that happens, he's like, he speaks to my heart, similar to what happened with Jairus's daughter in the Bible, where the servant comes to Jairus and says, don't bother the master anymore. Your daughter is dead. And Jesus says, don't be afraid, just believe. Jairus didn't even say anything yet. And he was like, don't be afraid, just believe. He spoke to this thing before it even could get breath in the man's lungs. And so I feel like that's the same thing God does with me. Before I can even be like, oh, nobody sees me, nobody knows what I'm doing, he's like, I know where you are. Relax. I see you. You know, this was the plan. And so it's just helped me a lot to slow down. And even though I would not want anybody to pass out in their car at 7 months pregnant, that experience really was a gateway into me being more grounded in who I am just as a person versus a worker bee. Because I'm great at working. It's the resting part that be getting me.
Listen, you and me both. I struggle so much with like resting because I feel like, okay, if I'm sitting down and I'm not doing anything, then that's something that could be done that I could take off my plate. And then you just get to that point where you're burnt out, you're tired, you're snapping at everybody, you're just mad at everything and everybody for absolutely no reason. But you're just because you're trying to do everything. And I even remember like one day I think I was like driving to work and I was just like, okay, God, you know what? I was like, oh, I'm done. I don't know what I'm doing here. Like I can't anymore. And I heard him say, oh, so now you're ready to listen to me. And I'm like, oh, so this is what we're doing right now. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, I'm here. And he's like, you sure? I'm like, oh, okay. Or like sometimes I'll be writing it. Like if anybody ever sees my prayer journal, they're gonna be like, this girl is crazy, because I'll be writing out my prayers, writing out what I'm thinking, and he'll be answering me and I'll be responding to the answer in my prayer journal. But it looks like if anybody ever sees it, they're gonna think that I'm having a conversation with myself, and they're gonna be like, this chick is crazy. But I'm like, no, God, me and God, we was talking over here. So definitely has a way of getting your attention when you're not paying him any attention. I wholeheartedly and fully agree with that. And he has definitely a lot lately been like, here we go again, let me grab your attention. So I get it. Well, I'm glad that you are safe from, past. I know it was years ago, but I'm glad that, you were unharmed and that your son was unharmed in that. Can you tell us, I know you said you had a podcast too. Can you tell tell us a little bit about your podcast?
No longer in production, but it was
Okay.
based on my book, The Black Girl's Guide to Living on Purpose, and changed all that for me because I had to. You see the theme there? Like he's like, "Girl, when are you gonna get that I'm it? I am
Yes.
the beginning and I'm the end." But even as a teenager, I was like, "Okay, if I'm in this relationship, that's what gives me significance. If I'm a part of this friend group, the friend group was huge. Like, oh man, that's what brings me significance. If I do these things, if I'm involved in these extracurricular activities and all of that, just God was like, it's me. And I tell people, when we look to external sources for our validation and our value, it's like someone with an Apple phone going to a Samsung store and saying, hey, can you help me with this? They're like, we didn't manufacture this, so no, we can't help you with that. And we go to other people and we go to our jobs and we're like, who am I? What am I supposed to do? And they're like, I don't know, I didn't make you. But people will give you their opinions, and a lot of times we'll take the people's opinions as facts and we'll operate that way, and it jacks us up. And then you spend years trying to undo the damage that was done because someone told you what you are and you went off of what they said. It ended up being a mess. So that's what the podcast was about. And I ended up also being able to share the stories of women of faith in business and just the ways that they've transitioned and the ebbs and flows that they've gone through with God in terms of being open to just the evolution of it all, right? I mean, and me even ending that podcast was a part of that. It began to see how I was making even that a part of my identity of like, okay, I'm the host of the Black Girls of Purpose podcast. Like, that's who I am. And, people talk about followings and stuff. We had grown our Instagram following to almost 2,000 people. We had like 60,000 downloads, and I think even now we're at like 70,000 downloads, and we had interviewed all these incredible women, and it was like, all right, and now you're going to walk away. And I just had to see that it was an assignment. And that's the way that I've started to view more of my life, not looking at everything like this is the thing, this was the end goal, right? But just looking at everything as an assignment, getting me to heaven ultimately. until God said, all right, come back. I'm like, all right, this is my next assignment.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I've definitely lately been asking God, like, okay, show me what you want me to do. Tell me what you want me to do. Tell me what you want me to focus on today. Order my steps. Like, tell me what my assignment is. And a couple times I'm like, are you sure that's what you want? He's like, I just told you that. I'm like, okay, cool.
Like I said, what I said.
Right, exactly. It's like, did you not hear me? So I'm like, oh, okay, God, I just want a little clarification, make sure I heard you correctly there. I'm just asking. Well, I love that. Well, Brieanna, I have enjoyed talking to you so much. Before we go, is there anything else that you would like to share? Any other advice or tips or anything?
I would just encourage anyone listening to just forgive yourself for the things you didn't know in the past. I know that sometimes you may be on here and be in $10,000 worth of credit card debt because you're like, I did get the most expensive package for the website, and now I'm not even using the website because I realized that my offer was completely different than what I thought it was supposed to be. And like, listen, we get it. I understand. But even in scripture, it talks about, and it's on a larger context, but it just talks about us being judged according to the things that we know, not according to the things that we don't know. And if we feel like, oh, I failed, I've fallen so far, that's the way the enemy gets us to quit. Because it's like, oh, you can't start over. You can't pay down that debt. You can't give people advice about this. You barely holding on yourself, So when we decide to look at the past choices that we've made, because that's what they ultimately come down to, is these were just choices that we made in a particular time, and we forgive ourselves for those choices, and then we choose to move differently, it can be so freeing. So that's a piece of advice that I would give.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And how can everyone find you or connect with you?
Yeah, so I would, if you need to connect with me, go to brandsbybrie.com. If you are interested in any of the courses that I mentioned throughout the episode, you can go to brandsbybrie.com, and on the right-hand side, there's a link that says Brands by Brie Academy, and that'll take you to our digital course library. And if you use the promo code TheModPod, you'll get 30% off of any of the courses in there, including like the digital downloads and the bundles and all that jazz. The Mod Pod.
The Mod Pod. Thank you. And I will make sure sure to link all of that into the show note as well as along with the code. So, well, Brieanna, thank you so much. I have enjoyed this conversation. I really thank you for being on here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, before we go, I always forget
Yeah.
this. I don't know why. Where are you located at? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Modco Podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and learned something from it. Be sure to share this episode with a friend, family member, colleague, or anyone you think will enjoy it. Make sure you hit the follow or subscribe button. And if you love the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcasting app. That helps others to find us and gets us listed in other show recommendations. So you all know that I run on coffee, and so does the show. If you'd like to buy us a coffee, you can do so by clicking on the link in the show notes. Thank you so much, and chat soon.